The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as representatives from 47 species gathered in their designated sectors. Each alien form was distinct, the towering Zelkari with their chitinous exoskeletons, the ethereal Vorthak floating in their containment fields, the reptilian Kethmori coiled in their heated alcoves. At the center of it all, a single human sat alone at a modest desk, seemingly oblivious to the hostile stares directed his way. Ambassador Marcus Chun appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. Average height, brown hair showing touches of gray, wearing a simple black diplomatic suit that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced materials and technologies displayed by other species. His only distinguishing feature was a pair of old-fashioned glasses that he occasionally adjusted while reviewing documents on a basic tablet device. High Counselor Thexran of the Zelkari hegemony rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. His voice reverberated through the translation matrices, carrying undertones of barely contained aggression. "The matter before us today requires no lengthy deliberation," Thexran announced, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The species known as humanity has existed in our awareness for precisely 73 standard cycles. In that brief time, they have demonstrated patterns that threaten the stability of our ancient order." Murmurs of agreement rippled through various sectors. The Vorthak representative pulsed with agitated colors, while several Kethmori species representatives hissed their approval. Marcus Chen looked up from his tablet, blinking mildly behind his glasses. "Counselor Thexran, if I may you may not," Thexran cut him off with a sharp gesture. Humanity's rapid expansion across 17 systems, their aggressive diplomatic postures, and their concerning military buildup cannot be ignored. Intelligence reports indicate they possess weapons capable of planetary sterilization. A holographic display materialized above the council floor, showing grainy surveillance footage of human ships, military installations, and what appeared to be massive orbital weapons platforms. The images were intentionally dramatic, designed to emphasize threat rather than provide context. Furthermore, continued a new voice from the Ethereal Collective's representative, their psychological profiles indicate dangerous levels of unpredictability and violence. They engage in recreational combat sports, maintain standing armies even in peacetime, and their entertainment media glorifies warfare and destruction. More evidence flashed across the displays, footage from human boxing matches, clips from action movies, images of military parades. To species that had evolved past physical conflict millennia ago, these images seemed barbaric and threatening. Marcus cleared his throat softly. "If the council would permit me to respond to these allegations." "There are no allegations," Thexran's voice boomed. "These are established facts. The question before us is not whether humanity poses a threat, but how quickly we must act to neutralize that threat before it grows beyond our ability to contain." The Kethmori delegate's forked tongue flicked out as she spoke. "Our military analysts project that within 50 standard cycles, human expansion will reach critical mass. Their reproduction rate exceeds galactic norms by a factor of 3. Their technological advancement curve suggests they will achieve parity with council species within 2 generations. Which is precisely why we must act now," added the representative from the Machine Consciousness Collective, its artificial voice devoid of emotion. "Probability matrices indicate a 97.3% chance of successful pacification if action is taken within the next 10 cycles. This drops to 23.7% if we delay beyond 50 cycles." Marcus sat quietly, occasionally making notes on his tablet while the various species presented their cases. His demeanor remained calm, almost scholarly, as if he were attending a university lecture rather than what amounted to a trial for his species' existence. The Vorthak representative's containment field shimmered as it spoke through psychic transmission. "The Vorthak Collective has observed similar patterns in 37 previous species over the past millennium. In each case, early intervention prevented galactic instability. The precedent is clear. What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its soft tone. Thexran's mandibles spread in what might have been satisfaction. "Complete economic isolation, followed by systematic dismantling of human military assets, and, finally, supervised population reduction to sustainable levels. Perhaps 10 million individuals, carefully managed and prevented from further expansion." The casual mention of genocide, for that's what the population reduction euphemism meant, sent a chill through the chamber. Even among species that prided themselves on logical decision-making, the magnitude of what was being proposed was sobering. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering the proposal with academic interest. I see. And this decision has already been made? The preliminary vote was taken before your arrival, Thexran confirmed. 39 species voted in favor, 8 abstained. Your presence here is merely a courtesy, to inform humanity of our decision and allow you to prepare your people for the transition. How very considerate, Marcus replied, and something in his tone made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. And when would this transition begin? The isolation protocols take effect immediately upon conclusion of these proceedings. Military action will commence in 7 standard days to allow for civilian evacuation from contested systems. Marcus removed his glasses and cleaned them carefully with a small cloth. Without the lenses, his eyes seemed sharper, more focused. 7 days. That's quite generous, considering you're planning to exterminate my species. Reduction, not extermination, corrected the machine consciousness representative. The distinction is important for historical records. Oh, I understand the distinction perfectly, Marcus said, replacing his glasses. I'm simply curious about the implementation details. For instance, how do you plan to deal with humanity's defensive capabilities? Thexran's mandibles clicked dismissively. Our intelligence indicates human military technology is approximately 200 cycles behind current Council standards. Your largest vessels mass less than a tenth of our smallest battleships. The disparity in firepower is insurmountable. Interesting assessment, Marcus mused. Based on what data, if you don't mind my asking? A holographic display shifted to show detailed schematics of human vessels, carriers, destroyers, frigates. The information appeared comprehensive, down to weapon specifications and crew complements. We have been observing humanity for the entire duration of your species' spacefaring existence, the ethereal collective's representative explained. Our surveillance networks have catalogued every human vessel, every military installation, every weapons platform. Marcus studied the schematics with apparent interest. These are quite detailed. Almost as if you had inside sources. The methods of intelligence gathering are classified, Thexran stated firmly. Of course they are. Marcus stood slowly, gathering his few belongings. Well, this has been most illuminating. I assume I'm free to return to human space to deliver your message? You have safe passage guaranteed until you cross back into human territory, the Kethmori delegate confirmed. After that, you will be considered a military target like any other human. Understood. Marcus paused at his desk, looking around the massive chamber at the assembled representatives. Before I go, might I share something interesting I learned about galactic history during my time here? Thexran gestured impatiently. Speak quickly. This session has already consumed more time than warranted. Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, his expression held no warmth whatsoever. I've been reading about the Vortak Collective's mention of 37 previous species that were reduced to prevent galactic instability. Fascinating reading. The Vortak representative's containment field flickered nervously. Those incidents are classified historical records. Oh, I'm sure they are, Marcus continued conversationally. But what I found most interesting wasn't the official records. It was the pattern of how these 37 species were identified as threats. The chamber had grown noticeably quieter. Several representatives were exchanging glances with their neighbors. Every single one, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast space, showed the same characteristics you've attributed to humanity. Rapid expansion, advanced military technology, high reproduction rates, aggressive tendencies. Almost as if someone had a checklist. Your point? Thexran demanded, though his tone had lost some of its earlier confidence. My point, Marcus replied, removing his glasses again and folding them carefully, is that 37 species don't just conveniently become threats requiring extermination. They're made into threats. They're manipulated, provoked, and positioned so that their destruction appears necessary to maintain galactic stability. The silence in the chamber was now complete. Even the ambient humming of the translation matrices seemed muted. Marcus continued, his scholarly demeanor unchanged but, his words carrying weight that seemed to press down on the assembly. What's particularly fascinating is the economic analysis. Every one of these 37 species controlled valuable resources or trade routes. The Halkan Empire controlled the lithium-rich Outer Rim before they became a threat. The Korth Dominion managed the most efficient shipping lanes in the Spiral Arm before they required reduction. These are baseless accusations, Thexran said, but his mandibles had stopped clicking. Are they? Marcus asked pleasantly. Because I've had some very interesting conversations during my stay here. Did you know that junior analysts in the intelligence division have access to remarkably detailed economic projection models? And that these models specifically calculate the resource redistribution benefits of removing certain species from contested territories? The machine consciousness representative's artificial voice carried a note of uncertainty. Such analyses are standard risk assessment protocols. I'm sure they are, Marcus agreed. Just as I'm sure it's standard protocol to manufacture evidence of military buildup, to misrepresent defensive preparations as aggressive expansion, and to conveniently ignore diplomatic overtures from species you've already decided to eliminate. Marcus walked slowly around his desk, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. The fascinating thing about patterns is that once you recognize them, they become very difficult to ignore. And the pattern here is quite clear: the Galactic Council doesn't maintain peace through diplomacy. It maintains control through selective genocide, carefully disguised as necessary intervention. These accusations are groundless and inflammatory, the Ethereal Collective's representative declared, though its ethereal form was shifting colors rapidly. Are they? Marcus stopped walking and faced the assembly directly. Then, perhaps you can explain why Council military forces have been positioning themselves along human trade routes for the past 6 months? Or why communication relays to human space have been experiencing such convenient technical difficulties? Or why several of our diplomatic envoys to neutral systems have simply disappeared? The questions hung in the air like accusations. Several representatives were now actively avoiding eye contact, while others whispered urgently to their aides. Marcus put his glasses back on, the simple gesture somehow making him appear more dangerous rather than less. You see, the problem with running a galactic empire disguised as a peaceful council is that eventually, you encounter a species that doesn't follow your predicted patterns. A species that asks uncomfortable questions. Humanity will be reduced regardless of your protests, Thexran declared, rising to his full imposing height. The decision is final. Oh, I have no doubt you'll try, Marcus replied calmly. The question is whether you'll succeed. After all, your intelligence seems to have some significant gaps. Our intelligence is comprehensive and accurate, the Kethmori delegate insisted. Marcus smiled again, and this time the expression was genuinely terrifying in its calm certainty. Is it? Then, tell me, what happened to the human survey ship Meridian that disappeared near the Zelkari border 3 months ago? Thexran's mandibles twitched. Unknown vessel. Presumably lost to navigation error or mechanical failure. Interesting theory, Marcus mused. Except the Meridian wasn't lost. It was captured by Zelkari raiders, its crew interrogated for intelligence about human military capabilities, and then executed to prevent word from reaching human space. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Thexran's exoskeleton darkened with agitation. Furthermore, Marcus continued in the same conversational tone, the Meridian's crew was tortured for access codes to human communication networks. Which explains how you obtained such detailed intelligence about our military assets. What it doesn't explain is why you believed that intelligence was accurate. You're suggesting the intelligence was deliberately falsified, the machine consciousness representative asked. I'm not suggesting anything, Marcus replied. I'm stating facts. The Meridian's crew, knowing they were going to be executed regardless of their cooperation, provided your interrogators with meticulously crafted disinformation. False ship specifications, fabricated weapons capabilities, fictional base locations, and completely imaginary military protocols. The implications of this revelation rippled through the assembly like a physical wave. If the intelligence was false, then their entire assessment of human capabilities might be wrong. Impossible, Thexran declared. The intelligence was verified through multiple sources. Multiple sources all stemming from the same compromised crew, Marcus corrected. Your analysts did excellent work cross-referencing the data, validating it against theoretical models, and extrapolating future capabilities. Unfortunately, they were validating lies told by dead men who knew exactly what you wanted to hear. Marcus walked back to his desk and picked up his tablet. But, please, don't let me stop you from proceeding with your invasion plans. I'm curious to see how they work out when you discover that human military capabilities aren't quite what your intelligence suggested. The chamber erupted in urgent conversations as representatives conferred with their advisors and military attaches. Holographic displays flickered with new data as intelligence analysts scrambled to reassess their conclusions. Through it all, Marcus stood quietly at his desk, projecting an air of patient academic interest while chaos swirled around him. He occasionally glanced at his tablet, checking what appeared to be routine diplomatic correspondence. Finally, Thexran called for order. Even if some intelligence data is suspect, he declared, the fundamental assessment remains valid. Humanity poses a long-term threat that must be addressed. Perhaps, Marcus agreed. But, now you have to ask yourselves a very important question. Which is? Marcus looked up from his tablet, and, for just a moment, every representative in the chamber saw something flicker behind his mild academic facade. Something cold and calculating and absolutely lethal. The question, Marcus said quietly, is whether you feel lucky. The weight of those words settled over the assembly like a shroud. In the space of a single conversation, the confident certainty of the council's position had been systematically dismantled by a human who appeared to be nothing more than a scholarly diplomat with outdated eyewear. As Marcus gathered his belongings and prepared to leave, every representative in the chamber was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth: they had severely underestimated their intended victims. And, in the cold mathematics of galactic warfare, underestimation was often fatal. The journey back to human space should have taken Marcus 48 hours aboard his diplomatic transport. Instead, it took him 6 days of careful maneuvering through supposedly neutral systems, avoiding the council patrol ships that had suddenly become very interested in monitoring his movements. His small vessel, the diplomatic courier ship Olive Branch, was everything the council believed human technology to be: primitive, underpowered, and defensively vulnerable. Its hull was constructed from basic titanium alloys, its engines ran on simple fusion reactors, and its only weapons were a pair of defensive plasma cannons that wouldn't threaten a council patrol boat. What the council's extensive surveillance had failed to detect was that the Olive Branch was not what it appeared to be. As Marcus entered the bridge for his final approach to Earth, he spoke quietly to the ship's computer. Navigation, please display our actual specifications. The holographic display that materialized showed a vessel that bore only superficial resemblance to the ship council intelligence had catalogued. Beneath the primitive exterior lay adaptive metamaterials that could reconfigure the ship's structure in real time. The supposed fusion reactors were actually containment units for controlled zero-point energy extraction. The defensive plasma cannons were focusing arrays for weapons systems that had no equivalent in council technology. Communication, open a priority channel to Fleet Command, Marcus instructed. Channel open, Ambassador, the computer replied in a voice that carried subtle inflections impossible for any council AI to produce. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the communication screen, her resemblance to Marcus evident despite the 30-year age difference. Welcome back, little brother. How did it go? About as expected, Marcus replied, settling into his command chair. They took the bait completely. Full commitment to the invasion plan, scheduled to begin in 6 days. And they bought the false intelligence? Every fabricated detail. The interrogation of the Meridian's crew was a masterpiece of controlled information warfare. Captain Torres and his people died heroes, but their sacrifice gave us exactly what we needed. Sarah nodded grimly. The funeral was yesterday. Full military honors. Their families know the truth about what they accomplished. Marcus was quiet for a moment, remembering the crew he had met only briefly before their final mission. Their deception was flawless. The Council believes our largest battleships mass 800,000 tons with primitive kinetic weapons and basic plasma shields. When they actually mass 4 million tons with reality distortion weaponry and temporal defensive systems, Sarah finished. The look on their faces when they realize will almost be worth the wait. There's more, Marcus continued. I managed to confirm the Council's true purpose. They're not maintaining galactic peace, they're running a protection racket on a cosmic scale. 37 species reduced in the past millennium, always for the same manufactured reasons, always resulting in resource redistribution to Council members. Genocide for profit, Sarah said, her voice carrying cold anger. How civilized of them. The pattern is unmistakable. They identify valuable systems controlled by non-council species, manufacture evidence of aggressive expansion or military buildup, then eliminate the threat while claiming moral high ground. The surviving council species divide the spoils. And now they think humanity is just another target. Marcus smiled, the expression holding no warmth. They're about to learn why that was a mistake. What's the status of Operation Prometheus? Sarah's image split to show tactical displays. All 73 fleet groups are in position. The stealth networks have been monitoring Council military movements for the past year. We know the location of every ship, every base, every command center. Their force deployment? Exactly as predicted. They're concentrating 80% of their total military assets for the invasion of human space. Apparently, they want to make sure this reduction is swift and decisive. Which means they've left their home systems virtually defenseless, Marcus observed. Precisely. The Zelkari hegemony has pulled 400 ships from their border defense to join the invasion fleet. The Vortak Collective has committed their entire warsphere network. The machine consciousness has allocated 60% of their automated defense platforms. Marcus studied the tactical displays, noting the massive concentration of Council forces gathering at the edge of human space. They really believe this will be easy. Can you blame them? According to their intelligence, they're bringing overwhelming force against primitive opponents. The invasion fleet they've assembled could sterilize 50 systems. Fortunately, we don't intend to let them reach our systems, Marcus replied. Admiral, please implement Protocol Damocles. Sarah's expression grew serious. Marcus, are you certain? Once we cross that line, there's no going back. They crossed the line when they decided to commit genocide, Marcus said quietly. They made their choice. Now they live with the consequences. Understood. Transmitting authorization codes now. Across human space, nearly invisible signals reached ships that had been waiting in perfect silence for months. Vessels that appeared on no official registries, that had been constructed in hidden shipyards, that incorporated technology the Council couldn't imagine, began moving toward predetermined coordinates. The real human fleet was nothing like the collection of primitive vessels the Council had catalogued. These ships were built using principles discovered during humanity's brief but intensive contact with a dying civilization in the deep dark, beings of immense technological advancement who had shared their knowledge before disappearing into the cosmic void. Each ship was a masterwork of engineering that blended human innovation with technologies that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. They could phase through solid matter, manipulate time flow in localized areas, and deploy weapons that attack targets at the quantum level. More importantly, they had been designed specifically to counter Council technology, which relied heavily on energy shields, plasma weaponry, and kinetic barriers. Admiral, Marcus continued, I need you to understand something about what's going to happen. The Council representatives weren't just planning invasion, they were looking forward to it. They spoke about population reduction like it was a routine administrative task. They've done this 37 times before. I understand completely, Sarah replied. That's why the response needs to be proportional to their intentions. Marcus nodded. Very well. Execute Damocles on my authority as senior diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council. Damocles is active. All fleet groups report ready. Estimated time to target, 14 hours. The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone on his bridge as the olive branch approached Earth. Through the viewports, he could see the familiar blue marble of humanity's homeworld, peaceful and serene in the depths of space. In 14 hours, the galaxy would learn that humanity was not the primitive, aggressive species the Council believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had been underestimated by beings who considered genocide a reasonable foreign policy option. Meanwhile, in the depths of space at the edge of human territory, the massive Council invasion fleet waited in perfect formation. Over 6,000 ships representing the combined military might of the galaxy's dominant species hung in the void, their commanders confident in their overwhelming superiority. High Admiral Thexran commanded from his flagship, the 8-kilometer-long dreadnought Absolute Dominion. Around him, his command staff monitored sensors and communications, ensuring the fleet maintained perfect battle readiness. Intelligence update, demanded Thexran. Human defensive positions remain unchanged, reported his tactical officer. 23 primary installations, 47 secondary bases, estimated total defensive fleet of 800 vessels. Pathetic, muttered the Vorthak war commander, its psychic presence cold with anticipation. This will barely qualify as a training exercise. The machine consciousness battle coordinator spoke in its emotionless artificial voice. Probability calculations indicate 99.7% chance of complete victory within 6 standard hours. Estimated Council casualties, negligible. Thexran's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. And human casualties? Total, the coordinator replied without inflection. Excellent. Begin final preparations. The invasion commences in 12 hours. Orders flowed through the massive fleet as thousands of ships prepared for what their commanders believed would be a brief and decisive military action. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and troop transports loaded with occupation forces moved into position. None of them noticed the subtle distortions in space around their formation, the barely detectable gravitational anomalies that indicated the presence of something that shouldn't exist according to Council understanding of physics. The human stealth fleet had been watching for 3 days. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the stealth destroyer Nemesis from her position just 2 kilometers from the Council flagship. Her ship was completely undetectable, existing in a state of quantum uncertainty that made it invisible to every known form of sensor. Tactical assessment, she ordered quietly. 6,237 confirmed Council vessels, her tactical officer reported. Composition matches intelligence projections. They've brought everything they have. Defensive readiness? Minimal. They're configured for assault operations, not defense. Shields at standard patrol strength, point defense systems offline, fighter squadrons in hangar bays. Vasquez studied the tactical display showing the massive Council formation. They really believe this is going to be easy. Captain, her communications officer interrupted, receiving Damocles' authorization from Fleet Command. Confirmed. All stations, prepare for Operation Damocles. Target assignment, Council flagship Absolute Dominion. Throughout the stealth fleet, similar conversations were taking place on 72 other vessels. Each ship had been assigned specific targets among the Council formation, with emphasis on command vessels and strategic assets. Captain, the tactical officer said, Damocles protocols are active. All weapons systems show ready. Vasquez looked at the massive Council flagship on her main screen, its hull bristling with weapons designed to rain destruction on human worlds. In a few hours, that ship would have been leading an invasion force toward Earth. Instead, it was about to discover what happened when a species that had survived extinction events, world wars, and planetary disasters decided to defend itself. Very well, she said quietly. Execute Damocles. The word that had hung over humanity's enemies for 6 days finally fell. Across the Council fleet, impossible things began happening simultaneously. Ships that had been running at standard operational status suddenly found their shields overloading, their weapons misfiring, and their communication systems broadcasting nothing but static. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Weapons that violated known physics struck targets that shouldn't have been reachable. Council ships found themselves fighting enemies they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. High Admiral Thexran watched in horror as his carefully organized invasion fleet dissolved into chaos. Report, he demanded. Unknown contacts, his sensor operator shouted. They're everywhere. Weapons fire from impossible directions. We're taking casualties across the entire formation. Impossible. Our sensors show empty space. Sir, the Vindication is gone. Direct hit by unknown weapon. The Eternal Victory is reporting critical damage to all systems. The tactical display showed Council ships winking out of existence one by one, destroyed by attackers that registered on no sensor, struck by weapons that left no energy signature. Communications. Contact the human ambassador. Demand an explanation for this treachery. Sir, Ambassador Chen's ship left the area 6 hours ago. Thexran felt the first cold touch of understanding. 6 hours, exactly when we lost contact with our advance scouts. Admiral, the tactical officer called out. Enemy vessels are becoming visible. Mother of all darkness, what are those things? On the main display, the true human fleet revealed itself. Ships that defied conventional understanding of engineering hung in space around the Council formation like predators surrounding prey. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow, their weapon systems bore no resemblance to anything in Council databases, and their very presence seemed to distort spacetime around them. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported, his voice shaking. On screen. The image that appeared showed Marcus Chen, still wearing his simple diplomatic attire and old-fashioned glasses. But, gone was any pretense of mild academic interest. The man looking back at them was cold, calculating, and utterly merciless. High Admiral Thexran, Marcus said pleasantly. I thought you should know, the human response to your planned genocide has begun. This is an act of war. Thexran raged. You attacked without provocation. Provocation? Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. You assembled 6,000 ships to exterminate my species. That seems rather provocative. Around the Absolute Dominion, more Council ships were disappearing in flashes of exotic energy. The invasion fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had never seen coming. You deceived us. The intelligence about your capabilities was false. Yes, it was, Marcus confirmed. Did you really think a species that survived to become spacefaring would be stupid enough to reveal its true defensive capabilities to potential enemies? This was planned from the beginning. From the moment you decided to exterminate humanity, yes. Everything since then has simply been us choosing the time and manner of your defeat. Thexran watched his fleet dying around him and felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. What do you want? Marcus's smile was terrible in its cold certainty. What do we want? We want the same thing you wanted from us, Admiral. Except we're going to be much more thorough about it. The transmission ended, leaving Thexran to contemplate the implications of those words as his mighty invasion fleet continued its transformation from predator to prey. In the depths of space, humanity's true nature was finally being revealed to a galaxy that had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a species that had learned to survive by being more ruthless than anything that threatened it. The destruction of the Council invasion fleet took exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, 6,237 warships had been reduced to drifting debris and escape pods. The survivors, barely 3,000 beings from a force that had numbered in the millions, found themselves prisoners of an enemy they were only beginning to understand. High Admiral Thexran sat in the detention area of the human vessel Retribution, his massive form cramped in a space designed for smaller beings. Around him, other senior Council officers waited in similar discomfort, each grappling with the reality that their seemingly unstoppable invasion force had been annihilated in a matter of hours. Captain Elena Vasquez entered the detention area, her presence commanding immediate attention from the prisoners. She was tall for a human, with graying hair and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. Gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. Ladies. Artificial intelligences. Collective consciousnesses. Whatever you prefer to be called. I'm Captain Vasquez, and I'll be conducting your debriefing. This is a violation of all galactic conventions regarding prisoners of war, Thexran declared, his mandibles clicking with agitation. We demand to be treated according to established protocols. Vasquez consulted a tablet in her hands. Interesting. According to my records, those same conventions were ignored when the Council eliminated 37 other species over the past millennium. The Halkan Empire demanded proper treatment too. How did that work out for them? The detention area fell silent. The weight of their own precedents was suddenly very clear to the surviving council officers. However, Vasquez continued, humanity believes in the rule of law, even when dealing with genocidal maniacs. You'll be treated according to the standards you've established for your own prisoners. Which, coincidentally, are quite detailed thanks to the records we recovered from your ships. She gestured to several human soldiers who entered carrying what appeared to be standard interrogation equipment. Don't worry. Everything we're about to do to you is exactly what you did to the crew of the Meridian. Same techniques, same intensity, same duration. The machine consciousness representative's artificial voice carried a note of confusion. This serves no strategic purpose. You have already achieved total victory. Strategic purpose? Vasquez repeated. This isn't about strategy. This is about justice. You see, we've had 6 days to review the full records of your previous interventions. The Korth Dominion. The Stellar Federation. The Ethereal Union. 37 civilizations, each with billions of individuals, all eliminated because they didn't fit your economic models. She moved closer to the prisoners, her expression hardening. Do you have any idea what it's like to read the final transmissions from the Helken homeworld as your fleet sterilized every population center? To listen to parents trying to shield their children from plasma bombardment while explaining to them why the sky was burning? Those actions were necessary for galactic stability, the Vorthak representative protested, its ethereal form flickering with distress. Galactic stability, Vasquez repeated flatly. Is that what you call it when you murder entire species for their resources? Because we have a different name for it. She activated her tablet, and holographic displays filled the detention area. Images of destroyed worlds, recorded atrocities, detailed records of systematic extermination. The documentation was comprehensive and horrifying. These are the official council records, Vasquez explained. Maintained with bureaucratic precision. Kill counts, resource redistribution calculations, economic impact assessments. You documented everything. Thexran stared at the images with growing unease. How did you obtain classified council archives? The same way we obtained everything else, Vasquez replied. We asked nicely, and, when that didn't work, we took what we needed. Your information security is about as effective as your military intelligence. The truth was more sophisticated than that, but Vasquez saw no reason to explain that human information warfare capabilities were several decades ahead of Council defensive systems. The stealth infiltration of Council databases had been ongoing for 2 years, carefully extracting data without triggering security protocols. The question now, Vasquez continued, is what to do with you. She gestured to the displays. These records document crimes against sapience on a scale that defies comprehension. 37 species. Conservative estimate of casualties, 230 billion individuals. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Even for beings accustomed to thinking in galactic scales, the magnitude was staggering. However, Vasquez said, as I mentioned, humanity believes in the rule of law. So we're going to give you something your victims never received, a trial. A trial, the ethereal collective representative asked. Due process. Legal representation. The opportunity to present your defense. Everything you denied to the civilizations you destroyed. Thexran's mandibles clicked nervously. What court has jurisdiction over the Galactic Council? Vasquez smiled, and the expression was terrifying in its calm certainty. The court we're going to create. You see, while you were preparing to invade human space, we were preparing something else entirely. The detention area's walls suddenly became transparent, revealing the view outside the ship. Instead of empty space, the prisoners found themselves looking at the largest structure any of them had ever seen. A massive space station hung in the void, its proportions defying easy comprehension. The structure stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its architecture incorporating design elements from dozens of different species. Docking bays could be seen accommodating ships of wildly different configurations. Welcome to Haven Station, Vasquez announced. The new seat of galactic government. Impossible, Thexran whispered. A structure of that size would take centuries to construct. Unless you had help from the 37 species you thought you'd eliminated, Vasquez replied casually. The implications of that statement hit the prisoners like a physical blow. Several of them began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in confusion and disbelief. Silence, Vasquez commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. You want explanations? Here they are. The council made one critical error in its genocidal campaigns. You assumed that killing 99% of a population meant eliminating the species. She activated new displays showing rescue operations, hidden colonies, emergency evacuations. The truth is that every species you reduced had survivors. Refugees who fled to the outer systems, researchers who were off-world when the attacks began, explorers who were beyond your reach. The numbers were too small for genetic viability, the machine consciousness representative protested. Were they? Vasquez asked. Because we've been finding these survivor populations for the past 5 years. Gathering them. Protecting them. Giving them the resources to rebuild. The displays showed thriving colonies, growing populations, species that had supposedly been extinct for centuries working together on massive construction projects. The Halkan Empire sends its regards, Vasquez continued. They're particularly eager to meet with Counselor Thexran. Something about war crimes tribunals and justice for their murdered homeworld. Thexran's exoskeleton had gone pale with shock. This changes everything. Yes, it does. You see, the problem with running a galactic empire through genocide is that eventually, your victims find each other. And, when they do, they tend to compare notes. The wall displays shifted to show detailed records of council operations, financial transfers, resource redistribution agreements. Evidence of systematic genocide compiled with legal precision. Every species you destroyed kept records, Vasquez explained. Final transmissions, archived data, testimony from survivors. We've spent 2 years gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, documenting crimes. What do you want? Thexran asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Justice, Vasquez replied simply. Trials for war crimes. Reparations for the survivors. And, most importantly, an end to the system that made this possible. The Council will never accept this. The Council no longer exists, Vasquez stated matter-of-factly. While you were marshalling your forces for the invasion of human space, we were implementing the real operation. New displays activated, showing Council homeworlds under occupation by combined human and survivor species fleets. The images were stark and undeniable, major Council worlds surrounded by ships from the very species they thought they had eliminated. Simultaneous operations, Vasquez explained. While your invasion fleet was being destroyed, other human task forces were securing every major Council world. Zelkari space is under occupation. Vortak colonies are surrounded. Machine consciousness production facilities are shut down. Impossible, the ethereal collective representative protested. Our home systems were heavily defended. By whom? Vasquez asked. You deployed 80% of your military assets for the invasion. What you left behind was sufficient to deal with the primitive species you thought you were fighting. It wasn't sufficient to deal with combined fleets of advanced human vessels and survivor species who had spent decades planning their revenge. The full scope of the operation was becoming clear to the prisoners. While they had been focused on what they thought was a simple genocide, their enemies had been orchestrating the complete dismantling of their civilization. The beauty of it, Vasquez continued, is that we used your own tactics against you. Deception, misdirection, false intelligence. You saw exactly what we wanted you to see until it was too late to matter. You're terrorists, Thexran declared. This is mass terrorism on a galactic scale. Vasquez stopped speaking and stared at him for a long moment. When she finally responded, her voice carried a cold fury that made the air itself seem to freeze. Terrorists, she repeated quietly. We're terrorists for stopping you from committing genocide? For preventing you from murdering my entire species the way you murdered 37 others? She moved closer to Thexran, her eyes reflecting decades of controlled anger. Do you want to know what terrorism looks like, Admiral? It looks like Council fleets sterilizing planets full of civilians. It looks like systematic extermination campaigns disguised as peacekeeping operations. It looks like bureaucrats casually discussing population reduction as if they were managing livestock. The detention area was completely silent now. Every prisoner was focused on the human captain who was revealing the true depth of their species' response to Council aggression. You call us terrorists, Vasquez continued, because we had the audacity to fight back. Because we refused to die quietly like your previous victims. Because we had the temerity to survive your attempts to eliminate us and the determination to ensure it never happens again. She gestured to the displays showing occupied Council worlds. Every action we've taken has been proportional to your crimes. You planned genocide, so we dismantled your capacity to commit genocide. You targeted civilians, so we neutralized your military assets. You denied justice to your victims, so we're implementing justice for your crimes. What happens to us now? The Kethmori delegate asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices, Vasquez replied. You'll be tried by representatives of every species you attempted to eliminate. Your cases will be heard by judges who understand exactly what you were planning to do to us. And, if we're found guilty? Vasquez's smile was terrible in its implications. Then, you'll receive the same mercy you showed to 230 billion innocent beings. The prisoners absorbed this information in stunned silence. The comfortable certainty of their galactic dominance had been shattered, replaced by the realization that they were now the ones facing extinction. However, Vasquez added, unlike you, we believe in justice rather than vengeance. The trials will be fair. You'll have legal representation. You'll be able to present evidence in your defense. And, if we're acquitted? Then, you'll be free to go, Vasquez replied. Though I suspect you'll find the galaxy a very different place than the one you remember. She gestured again to the displays showing Haven Station. Ships from dozens of species could be seen docking and departing, a bustling hub of activity that represented something the galaxy had never seen before, to true interspecies cooperation based on mutual respect rather than fear. You see, Vasquez explained, while you were building an empire through terror and genocide, the species you thought you'd eliminated were building something better. A genuine alliance based on shared values and common purpose. The irony was not lost on the prisoners. Their attempts to maintain galactic order through systematic murder had created exactly the kind of multi-species coalition they had feared. The funny thing about trying to eliminate dangerous species, Vasquez continued, is that you tend to miss the ones that are actually dangerous. You focused on species that were expanding, species that were developing advanced technology, species that were becoming economic competitors. What you missed were the species that were becoming something else entirely. Which was? Thexran asked. Better than you, Vasquez replied simply. Better at technology, better at cooperation, better at building civilizations that don't require genocide to maintain stability. She moved toward the exit of the detention area, then paused to deliver one final message. Your trials begin tomorrow, she announced. I suggest you use tonight to think about everything you've done, because tomorrow you're going to have to explain it to the people whose families you murdered. As the humans departed, the former council leaders were left alone with the weight of their crimes and the realization that their victims had not only survived but had grown strong enough to bring them to justice. Outside the detention area, Captain Vasquez met with Ambassador Marcus Chen, who had just arrived aboard Haven Station. How did they take the news? Marcus asked. About as well as expected. Shock, disbelief, desperate attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Marcus nodded. The trials will be difficult. Some of the survivor species are calling for immediate execution. I don't blame them, Vasquez replied. But, we have to be better than what we're replacing. If we descend to their level, we become what we fought to stop. Agreed. The galaxy is watching to see what kind of civilization emerges from this. We need to show them that justice doesn't require becoming monsters ourselves. They walked together toward the central command area of Haven Station, passing representatives from dozens of species working side by side. The station was more than a structure, it was a symbol of what was possible when civilizations chose cooperation over domination. Marcus, Vasquez said as they walked, do you think we made the right choice? This path we've started down? Marcus considered the question carefully. Through the massive viewports, they could see ships arriving from across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies, that had been isolated, that had been oppressed, all coming together to build something new. Ask me in 100 years, he replied. When we see what kind of galaxy we've actually created. And, if it turns out we were wrong? Marcus smiled, but, this time the expression held genuine warmth. Then, at least we'll have been wrong while trying to build something better than systematic genocide disguised as peacekeeping. As they reached the command center, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Former council territories were transitioning to new governments formed by survivor species. Trade routes were reopening under new management. Scientific research was being shared freely rather than hoarded for military advantage. The transformation would take years, possibly decades. There would be challenges, setbacks, conflicts between species that had been enemies for generations. But, for the first time in a millennium, the galaxy had a chance to become something other than a collection of civilizations living in fear of the next genocidal campaign. The Galactic Council's reign of terror was over. The age of cooperation was about to begin. And, it had all started with a single human in old-fashioned glasses, sitting quietly in a council chamber, waiting for the right moment to reveal that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, not because they were violent, but because they were smart enough to survive and determined enough to ensure that genocide would never again be considered a reasonable solution to galactic politics. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment when the victims finally became the judges, and justice replaced terror as the foundation of interstellar relations. But that story was only beginning.